Okay, welcome back to the exciting book of Genesis. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And so we're going to get back into Genesis, and today we're going to be taking a look at chapter 30 to the 7. Hallelujah. All right, and chapter 37 is actually the story of Joseph. And Joseph is a type of our Messiah. And some people wonder how so. So, yeah, willing, after we go through this chapter, you'll see various ways in which Joseph was a type of Yahshua. For he truly was, and his story taught the ages before us what was to happen when Yahshua would actually come. If one had eyes to see back then, they would have known, what had to be, even as the Messiah would tell his disciples, those things had to be that happened. They had to be, for he came to fulfill Scripture. He's even spoken of as coming in the volume of the book, and a lot of folks don't really take that to heart. But he truly did come in the volume of the book. And also, many people don't take to heart that we're supposed to walk in the volume of the book. Amen.
Amen.
Even as he did, for he is our example.
Yes.
All right, so that being said, Genesis chapter 37, let's jump right in. Let's have my first reader read Genesis 37, 1 through 4, please.
And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him.
Okay, so here it is. It says, Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, even in the land of Canaan. And Joseph being 17 years old, 17 speaks to victory. Joseph's name means let him add, or he will add, or adding. And so, Joseph, is all about adding. And when you consider, if you have eyes to see, Joseph truly did add to the house of Israel. He was responsible for the house of Israel becoming a mixed multitude in all actuality. And so he added, quite a bit to Israel. That being said, we're told that, the one that's adding, speaks to being 17 years old, 17 speaking of victory. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge, Joseph, in a spiritual sense, was a type of evangelist, if you would, as well, in how he would add to the house of Elohim. So just keep that in mind, for the spiritual picture. Now it says that when he was 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. And so here it is. We have a kind of a picture, Joseph being the favorite of his father, as we're told in verse 3, Joseph was kind of a snitch. He was tattletale. Go back and tell his dad, everything. And so, his brothers, he told on him, and so, they didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. Now, it says that Israel, in verse 3, loved Joseph more than all his children, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, this coat of many colors is a point of, a hot topic, so to speak, in amongst the translators, You know, some say it was many colors, some say otherwise. You know, when I look up the wording that's involved, the Hebrew wording that's involved, is kol kathone, you know, kathone number 3801, meaning to cover. So, you know, he made him, you know, a covering. You know, now it's translated as a shirt or coat or a garment, you know, but essentially, you know, it's a covering of some sort, you know, and the three words of many colors actually is translated from the Hebrew word paz, number 6446, meaning the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. And no matter what it was in the physical, spiritually speaking, it was a covering that covered the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. You know, and so, you know, this is why you see some translations, they'll say it was a long robe, you know, that went down to the feet, and, you know, and long sleeve that went down to the palms, you know. But, you know, what Yah shows me is that it was a covering that covered his hands and his feet. In other words, you know, his father made him a covering that covered the work of his hands, and it covered his walk. You know, and it says in Genesis 37:4 that when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. You know, and I want to, you know, draw, you know, an allusion or a parallel to the ministry of our Messiah, you know, because as I started off saying, Joseph is a type of the Messiah. You know, and they, you know, the Messiah's brethren, they also couldn't speak peaceably to him, you know, because they seen that his father loved him more than all his brethren, you know, because they was allowing him to do all these wonderful, you know, miracle signs and wonders, you know, and wouldn't let nobody else do it, you know, because, you know, and what they were actually seeing was the covering that the Heavenly Father had over his son, his favorite son, that covering that covered his hands and his walk, you know, his hands and his feet, which speaks to his works and his walk. And so the Messiah's, you know, works were covered by Yah, and his walk was covered by Yah. Amen. You know, and so in Luke 11:14-16, we're told, it says, and he was casting out a devil. He was doing some of these works, you know, that Yah had covered his hands with, you know, and it says, and it was dumb. Yeah, dumb devil. Yeah. And it came to pass when the devil was gone out, the dumb spake, and the people wondered. Everybody should have been, you know, rejoicing, right? But verse 15 tells us, but some of them said he cast out devils through Beelzebub, the chief of the devils. See how they couldn't speak peaceably to him? And others tempting them sought of him a sign from heaven. You know, well, if you really this, that, or the other, then show us a sign from heaven. Wasn't this a sign enough, you know, that the dumb spake? Amen. You know, so, you know, that we see here that they couldn't speak peaceably to our Messiah either. You know, let me have my next reader read verses 5-11 of Genesis 37, please.
And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying.
Hallelujah. So again, here it is. We see Joseph, dreaming dreams, and they hated him even more for his dreams, and it says in verse 7 that he dreamt that, for behold, they were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, his sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, their sheaves stood around and made obeisance to his sheaf. When we start speaking of sheaves, we're speaking of a harvest, okay? In order to get sheaves, you have to plant something. Amen. And so as we read in Talmudim or Psalms 100 that says, make a joyful noise, all ye lands. We are a type of land.
Yes.
And the Messiah even spoke about planting the seed in that land in the hearts of men. And some producing 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Well, if we, back off of that, and we consider that the word of the kingdom that's planted into our hearts, the hearts of the believers, there's one that's as Joseph, that's one that's adding to Elohim, whose sheaves would stand upright, and all the sheaves of his brethren would do obeisance to that sheaf. Even as that is to take place with our Messiah, and it says, and they hated him yet the more for his dreams, and so when you start thinking about what comes from the seed as well, these sheaves also speak to the harvest, or speak to, and then likewise speak to the progeny, his progeny or his seed, which will come forth from him. And so his brethren, they seen, that the dream was obviously about him reigning over them, and having dominion over them. And so they hated him yet more for his words, and so Yah didn't care, because he gave him another dream.
Right.
And he told his brethren to say, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. I got another one that one wasn't good enough. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars may obeisance to me. And this speaks to them directly, even as his father, Yaakov, understood that it was speaking to his brother and his mother and his father would make obeisance to him. And so we see one dream speaking possibly to his progeny, and one speaking to him and his brother directly. So it's a beautiful picture of what would happen to him, as well as with his seed to come. And it says that even Yaakov was taken aback on that one. Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow ourselves to thee to the earth? And indeed they would, before it's over. And even as with the Messiah, they will. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess. Amen?
Amen.
And so at least Yaakov had the sense enough to observe the same. And in parallel to this, we have Mark 12:10 through 12. And it says, and have ye not read this scripture? And this is the Messiah, of course, speaking to his brethren. It says, the stone which the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. This was Yahuwah's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. And they sought to lay hold on him, but they feared the people, for they knew that he had spoken the parable against them, and they left him and went their way. So they're hating him, because of his words. The words that he was saying, was really getting up under their skin. Likewise with Luke 4:24 through 29, it says, and he said, verily, I say unto you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up for three years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land, but unto none of them was Elijah sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, and a woman that was a widow. Wow. And he goes on to say, and many lepers were in Israel in a time of Elisha. Many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian. Now, in this example that he's given, I want you to be also be able to determine that, you know, he's speaking about, you know, his brethren who Yah would look over, you know, but show grace and mercy to the Gentiles. For the widow woman was a Gentile, and Naaman the Syrian was a Gentile. You know, and so here it is, he's telling them that, you know, hey, you know, acknowledge, you know, what the pattern that Yah is doing. He was bringing to their attention, you know, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, but Yah didn't choose one of them. He chose the widow woman, you know, in Sidon. You know, and Sidon was actually noted to be a very wicked city. But he chose, you know, he chose a woman out of Sidon. You know, it was, you know, very, very, very noted to be really wicked, you know. And also, he speaks of the lepers, you know, in Israel in the time of Elisha, the prophet, and how Yah didn't cleanse any of the Israelite lepers, but only Naaman the Syrian. You know, and so this was a beautiful picture that Yah was showing them, you know, letting them know that, hey, you know, you guys going to get left behind, but the ones that's going to be cleansed are the Gentiles. Hallelujah. I think my mic just died. Or it's dying. Okay. And it says, and all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath. And rose up. And rose up. They were filled with wrath and rose up and thrust him out of the city and led him unto the brow of the hill whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. You know, so we see that they really did hate him for his words as well. You know, they truly hated our Messiah for his words. You know, Genesis 37:12 through 16. And it reads, it says, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now Shechem speaks to a neck or ridge, you know, as in the place of burdens. You know, and so here it is, we see a spiritual picture of his brethren. You know, they're going to feed their flocks in Shechem. And it says, and Israel said unto Joseph, do not feed thy brethren. Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem. Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it will be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. You know, and a certain man founded him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. Okay, so, spiritually speaking, well, let's deal with Hebron first. Hebron speaks to a seat of association or friends. You know, now we have some Josephs in the house. You know, I'm sure there's some spiritual Josephs in the house in which Yah will use to add to the house of Elohim. You know, but, you know, at some point, they're going to have to leave, you know, Hebron, the valley of Hebron. They're going to have to leave their seat of association and place where their friends are. They're going to have to leave a place that's comfortable unto them, you know, and they're going to have to go to Shechem. Shechem, you know, speaks to the place of the burdens, you know, so they're going to have to go and they're going to have to pick up the burden of Elohim, you know, and that's what Shechem in the spiritual sense speaks to. It speaks to that burden of Elohim, and the ones that that Elohim burdened were the Levites, even those that were joined to him. You know, and so here it is, spiritually speaking, we see the brethren of Israel, they're out feeding their father's flock, you know. So they're all shepherds. So, you know, you can see a spiritual picture here of all the shepherds of Israel, you know, out feeding the flock of Elohim. You know, and it comes a time when Yah will send his favorite son unto them, you know, to bring him back word as to how well the flocks are going, and you know, and how are the brethren doing, you know, and to bring him word again. You know, and so, you know, this is a spiritual picture of when the Messiah will be sent to the earth, you know, and he's coming to his brethren who is feeding the flock, you know, of Elohim, those who have taken on the burden. And just who were those? You know, Numbers 4:46 through 49. My next reader, please.
All those that were numbered of the Levites, long Moses and Aaron and the chief of Israel, numbered after their families and after the house of their fathers, from 30 years old and upward, even unto 50 years old, everyone that came to the service of the ministry and the service of the burden in the tabernacle of the congregation. Even those that were numbered of them were 8,500 and fourscore. According to the commandment of Yahuwah, they were numbered by the hand of Moses, everyone according to his service and according to his burden. Thus were they numbered of him as Yahuwah commanded Moses.
Hallelujah. So again, we see here that it's the Levites, the ones who are joined to Yah, who had taken on the burden of Elohim. And that burden was the service of the tabernacle of Elohim. You know, and so we see here in verse 47, it says, you know, and everyone that came to do the service of the ministry and the service of the burden in the tabernacle of the congregation. You know, verse 49, everyone according to his service and according to his burden. You know, so the burden spoke to the responsibility that Elohim had put on those who are joined to him. Can you see that? You know, and so when the Messiah came, he came to, you know, check on those who were supposed to be joined to Elohim, you know, his brethren, to see how they were faring with the flocks of his father. You know, and needless to say, he didn't like what he saw. You know, and just in conjunction with that, you know, maybe, you know, when they seen Joseph coming, his brethren knew that they wasn't gonna, he wasn't gonna see what, he wasn't gonna like what he saw either, and so they wanted to keep him from going and tell his, their father another ill report. You know, and we're gonna see what they do, you know, to prevent all that. You know, let me have my next reader read Genesis 37:17 through 22.
And the man said, they are departed hence. For I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when he saw them, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said to one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast has devoured him. And we shall see what becomes of his dreams. And Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto him, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that there is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, and that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again.
Okay, now I pray that you can see the spiritual picture here, because, you know, Joseph's father led him, you know, sent him to Shechem, where his brethren were supposed to be. And we spoke about Shechem, you know, speaking to, you know, the burden that Elohim had put upon his people. You know, that he put upon the Levites that were joined to him, you know, which spoke to, you know, the service of the tabernacle or the temple of Elohim, right? You know, now, when Joseph, I want you to see the spiritual picture, when Joseph actually gets to Shechem, what does he find? He find that his brethren are no longer there. Okay, so his brethren has left the burden that Elohim has put on them, and they have went somewhere else. You know, hence the man said, yeah, they were here, you know, but they left from here, and the man said, they are departed hence. So they're no longer where Yah sent them. They're no longer where their father sent them, and they're no longer where, spiritually speaking, the shepherds of Elohim was no longer where he sent them. They were no longer carrying the burden that he had given them. Can you see that? But they departed there and they went to Dothan. Okay, now Dothan means two wells or two laws. See, and what I want you to see is that, you know, even as Joseph's brethren had left Shechem, they left the original place in which their father had sent them and went somewhere else, so did Yahshua's brethren, the Levites. They also left the burden that Elohim had put on them and went someplace else. Where did they go? They went to Dothan. They went to two laws. You know, it's real important that you see that. That's huge. You know, verse 18 says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Could it be because they already knew that they had left where they were supposed to be? Could they be seeking to kill him because they knew he was going to go and tell their father that they weren't where they were supposed to be? They had left the burden in which he had put upon them and started doing their own thing. You know, and so it says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him. You know, and again, you know, even with Yahushua, even when he came to the earth, he found his brethren not with the burden that they were supposed to be carrying for Elohim, his father, but in a whole nother place. They were in Dothan with two laws. They didn't just have the law of Elohim. They had an additional law of their own. They were doing their own thing. And yeah, he was going to tell dad. you know, it said, you know, in verse 20 says, come now therefore and let us slay him and cast him into some pit. You know, and this is what they would do to our Messiah as well. And we will say, some evil beasts have devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness. Hello, somebody. Can't get away from that wilderness, can you? You know, cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. Okay? Now, you know, in parallel to this, let us consider Matthew 15, 1 through 9. And it says, and then came Yahushua, the scribes and Pharisees. Well, let me have my next reader read Matthew 15, 1 through 9, please.
Then came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. But he answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress the commandment of Elohim by your tradition? For Elohim commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. Thus have ye made the commandment of Elohim of none effect by your tradition. Ye hypocrites, well did, what's that?
Isaiah.
Isaiah. prophecy of you saying, "This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men."
Okay, now, I present this to you so that you can see spiritual Dothan. You can see, that they had left the original burden of Elohim, and now they were at a place where they had two laws. They were at a place of Dothan. They were at a place where they had two laws. We see in verse 1 it says, then came to Yahushua the scribes and the Pharisees which were in Jerusalem, and saying, "Why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread." But he answered and said, "Why do ye also transgress the commandment of Elohim by your tradition?" You're not doing what Father told you to do. And I'm telling. You're not doing what Father told you to do. Here it is, you have your own traditions, and as verse 6 tells us, "Thus have ye made the commandment of Elohim of none effect by your tradition." Not only do you have another law, you make your laws, contradict the laws of our Father. Teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. So I pray that you can spiritually see that they truly had left Shechem and they were in Dothan. They were in a place where they had two laws. Genesis 37:23-28. My next reader, please.
And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they scribed Joseph of his coat of many colors that was upon him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery, balm, and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brother, "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brethren were content. Then there came pass by Midianites, merchant men, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Israelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt.
Okay, so here it is. We see that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors, or this coat that covered his hands and his feet. It covered his works and his walk. They're going to strip his works and his walk from him, from him, and they're going to cast him into a pit. Now this is symbolic, of a grave, if you would. This pit was, and within it there was no water, and it says, and a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Mitzrayim. And so here it is, we have Judah, and so Judah said to his brother, "Hey, what profit if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Let's sell him." And so this is what they're going to do. And it speaks of the Midianites, the merchant man passing by, and Midian speaks to strife. So here it is, we see, these men of strife, and, he's selling for 20 pieces of silver. Now 20 speaks to redemption, and in the parallel with Yahshua, this is what he was sold, into their hands for. It was to redeem, you know, all of Yah's people. Amen. You know, it was to redeem Israel. You know, and Ishmael, which speaks to he was hearing of Elohim, and Egypt speaks to double straits. You know, so we have some people that's filled with strife. You know, they're merchant men. You know, they buy and sell. You know, even people, right? You know, and we have Joseph. You know, that's you know, being sold to the Ishmaelites. You know, for 20 pieces of silver. You know, and they're putting them with, you know, what they had with the rest of their goods, which was balm and myrrh, you know, and spicery, you know, and they're carrying it down into double straits. You know, so spiritually speaking, we see Joseph, the one who's adding to the house of Elohim. We seeing him being stripped of his covering. We're seeing him being cast into a pit or dying. We see him, you know, being added to a company of Ishmaelites, you know, with their spices and balm and myrrh, and they're going into double straits. We see Judah selling them, you know, and we see the Ishmaelites, you know, and the men of strife, you know, buying him, you know, and selling them, you know, for the silver, you know, and him being brought into double straits. Now let's take a look at our parallel. You know, we see in Matthew 27:28, they stripped Yahshua as well, saying they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe. You know, so he got stripped as well. You know, that's in the physical. In the spiritual, he also got stripped. You know, he had just entered into covenant with 12 men. You know, even his disciples, who were supposed to be like that coat of many colors, you know, or that coat that covered his hands and his feet. You know, for when you enter into covenant with someone, they become responsible for you and yours. Amen. You know, this is and vice versa. They become responsible for you and yours, and you become responsible for them and theirs. You know, so just like when we enter into covenant with Yahshua and with Elohim, we become responsible for everything that is Yahshua's or Elohim's. Amen. And vice versa, Yahshua or Elohim becomes responsible for everything that is ours. You know, so now this is the way it's supposed to work. You know, but here it is. You know, he got this this covering, you know, of his 12, but you know, it gets stripped from him. You know, and spiritually speaking, we see this in Matthew 26:14-16. It says, then one of the 12, called Judas or Judah Iscariot, you know, went unto the chief priests and said unto them, what will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. So you see his covering coming off of him. Not only that, you also see Judah selling him, even as we saw Judah selling his Joseph in Genesis. Can you see the parallel? You know, and now even though one got 20 pieces of silver, the other one got 30 pieces of silver, and there's a reason for that too, but we're not getting into that right now. But Yochanan 13:2 says, and supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. So here it is, that covering was now stripped. You know, instead of covering him, he's actually opened him up to attack. You know, and so Matthew 27:59, it says, and Joseph had taken the body. When Joseph had taken the body, he had wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. You know, this is Joseph of Arimathea. You know, and it says, and there came also, and this is Yochanan 19:39, and there came also Nicodemus, which at the first came to Yahushua by night and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes about 100 pound weight. So Joseph of Arimathea, you know, he got him. He put his body in the grave, even as they put him in the pit. You know, his brethren put him in the pit. You know, and Nicodemus, you know, and both of these guys, they're acting secretly. You know, I want to bring that point out too. You know, and Nicodemus, which at first came to Yahushua by night, brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes about 100 pound weight. You know, and so here it is. You know, we see him actually getting put put with the myrrh and the spiceries, you know, and verse 40 of Yochanan 19, then took they the body of Yahushua and wound it in linen clothes with the spices, as the manner of the Yahudim is to bury. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, in the garden, a new sepulchre, wherein was never man yet laid. And there laid they Yahushua. Therefore, because of the Yahudim's preparation day for the sepulchre was nigh at hand. So they found a grave to put him in that was nearby, even as in Genesis, you know, Joseph's brethren found a place that was nearby to put him in. You know, let me have my next reader read Genesis 37, 29, and 30.
And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes, and returned unto his brethren, and said, The child is not, and whither shall I go?
Okay, so now we see Reuben was the one that was trying to, that didn't want him to die, you know, and so to spiritually see Reuben, we have to consider Reuben's rank, you know, within Israel. He was the firstborn. He was the firstborn of the 12 sons of Yaakov, right? You know, and so when we look at the first of the 12 of Yahshua, you know, we find Reuben, the same guy who didn't want him to die, you know, and it was Cephas, or Peter. We read in Matthew 16:18, it says, And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my ecclesia, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So we see he was the first one in. You know, Yahushua seen him, recognized him, and said, okay, this is going to begin with you. Luke 22, 31 and 32, let's fast forward to the end of his ministry. You know, and it says, and the Adonai says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. So we see that Cephas would be the first one converted as well. And, you know, and he's getting directions to strengthen his brethren after he's converted. You know, and again, this is in likeness to Reuben being the first of the 12, you know, of Israel. Now, we have also Yochanan 20, verses 6 through 10. It says, Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went in unto the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes. Now, this is Simon, or Cephas, you know, our spiritual Reuben, you know, coming back and finding that, you know, hey, Joseph's not there. You know, even as Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in there. So here it is, we see him coming, and he went into the sepulchre to see the linen clothes lie, and the napkin that was about his head, not lying with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also that other disciple which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed, for as yet they knew not the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away into their own home. You know, so here it is. We see a picture of Simon coming. The Messiah isn't there, you know, and of course he's in disdain. Woe is me. He's not here, you know, but he didn't know that he was have to rise again. And so same thing with Reuben. You know, he didn't know that, hey, he'll see Joseph again, you know. And it says, and the disciples went away unto their home. And this is what the brethren of Joseph is about to do too. They're about to pack it up and head back to the house. You know, conveniently after, you know, Joseph's dead. You know, now, Genesis 37:31 says, And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. Okay, so now, this word kid is Sair, number 8163, meaning shaggy or he-goat, and it can also speak to a devil. You know, so hereby we see a spiritual picture of Joseph's coat or covering being mixed with the blood of a kid or a devil. Now, when we consider Judas, who was supposed to be that covering, who betrayed the Messiah, stripped him of his covering, you know, we see he was also mixed with a devil. You know, in Luke 22:3-4, we read, it says, then entered Satan into Judah, certain and Iscariot, being of the number of the 12, and he went his way and communed with the chief priests and captains, how he might betray him unto them. You know, so, and then also in Acts 1:18-19, we see his blood, you know, also being mixed in there. You know, and it says, now this man purchased a field, speaking of Judas, with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers at Jerusalem, insomuch as the field is called in their proper tongue, Asodama, that is to say, the field of blood. You know, and so here it is, we see truly that this covering was mixed with, his covering was mixed with the blood. The covering that was stripped is actually mixed with blood, you know, of a kid or a devil. You know, and let me have my next reader read verses 32-35 of Genesis 37, please.
And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, this we have found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it, and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured it. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him.
Hallelujah. Okay, so, you know, here it is, as we seen that the coat was brought to their father, Judas, who would be destroyed, you know, he also would have to face his maker, you know, be presented to his maker, you know, and even as Yahushua, you know, will once again see his father, you know, as we read in Yochanan 20:17, Yahushua saith unto her, touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascended unto my father and your father, and to my Elohim and your Elohim, even as you know, they would see the Messiah's father would see him again, so would Joseph see his father again, you know, at some point, you know, and it speaks in verses 33-35, you know, that, you know, of course, his father knew the coat that he had made for his son, even as Elohim knows what he made and recognized it. You know, Genesis 37:36 says, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and a captain of the guard. And so here it is, we see a spiritual picture of those people of strife, selling them into double straits, you know, unto Potiphar, you know, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Now, Potiphar meaning belonging to the sun, you know, and so this is a sun worshiper, you know, and he was also an officer, which is Saris, in Hebrew number 5631, meaning a eunuch or an official, you know, and you know, he was an officer of Pharaoh, or the great house, you know, so he was an officer, you know, of or with or in conjunction to the great house, and the great house speaks to the temple of Elohim, you know, and he says he was the captain of the guard, or captain being ruler, leader, or chief, you know, and of the guard. The word guard is tabak, which speaks to an executioner, you know, an executioner or a butcher. So within the spiritual picture here, you see that these men of strife will sell Yahshua into double straits, you know, to one that was a sun worshiper, you know, an officer over the house of Elohim, the great house of Elohim, and the chief executioner. You know, and this is exactly what you see during the time of Yahshua. You know, in Matthew 27, 1 and 2, it says, when the morning was come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Yahushua to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him unto Pontius Pilate, the governor. You know, now Pontius Pilate, he was an officer that was over the temple. You know, and that's who they delivered him to. And he was the chief executioner during that time. And that's why they delivered him unto him. You know, and he was a sun worshiper. You know, even as Potiphar, his name meant. You know, and he was the chief. I said he was the chief executioner, but he was the captain or chief or leader. You know, as well. So we see everything aligns. You know, with the ministry of Yahshua. You know, truly, Joseph was a type of our Messiah. That's all I have for you today. Pray with a blessing.